Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. It has been a few months since I have recorded one of these videos. It has been a very busy summer in 2025 in my family. Everything from having a catastrophic collapse of appliances to welcoming the birth of our new daughter. So very busy, very active, very tiring. But I am excited to be getting back into this, and one of the things that's going to be changing up on the channel, at least for the meantime, that I'm going to try is, given that my schedule is a lot tighter, rather than focusing on talking about research while I'm cooking dinner, we have acquired a Ninja Creamy Swirl as part of a joint anniversary present between my wife and I this year. So I've been making a lot of homemade ice creams, and I'm actually going to make this a little bit more fun, I think, and talk about different ice cream recipes for at least the meantime while I talk about research. So the first thing we'll be talking about today is, or maybe not necessarily the first thing we're talking about, but be talking about a dragon fruit ice cream recipe that I've been making, and also a review paper from 2024 that looks at issues of PTSD in populations of individuals with autism spectrum disorders. So let's get into it. So this paper, like I said, comes from 2024 from the Review Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, authored by Quinton, Danese, Happe, and Rumball out of the United Kingdom. Looks like the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience at King's College in London. So really dense, good paper, though, that summarizes 18 studies over recent years that looks at PTSD and other trauma-related issues among individuals who identify as having autism spectrum disorders. Some of the major findings of what they pulled together from these 18 studies was that individuals who identify as having or who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders are prone and potentially may have greater symptom severity when experiencing PTSD symptoms. There is a great table here. I'll throw it up on the side here. Table 3 nicely highlights where some of the different issues are that individuals who are on the autism spectrum may have more severe symptomology. So really interesting to look at some of that. But overall, what some of the findings suggest in this review paper is that the major symptoms that we may see more significant presentation with are negative cognitions, rumination, and memory-related deficits. Personally, I often think of PTSD and trauma-related disorders as a disorder of memory in a lot of ways, kind of being stuck on that loop. So it's not particularly surprising that these individuals would experience significant memory-related disruption. And perhaps with some of the cognitive aspects of autism spectrum disorder, that interaction is actually what makes it worse. But that is just a possible hypothesis or even supposition that I'm making. One of the things that they also identified is that the presentation of symptoms, of PTSD symptoms particularly, may not fit DSM-5 criteria terribly well. One of the things that they touched on that isn't terribly well identified in the literature is how individuals who have autism or autism spectrum related disorders may experience trauma differently. They may experience greater levels of trauma due to not having as many coping resources compared to neurotypical counterparts. So therefore, how a person experiences trauma then becomes a subjective experience. It's not just so cut and dry as experiencing a major tragedy. So one of the arguments for complex PTSD, which we really don't see too terribly well in DSM-5, is how multiple traumas that are subjective in nature may stack upon each other. So that is definitely something to consider, is when working with these individuals, is what is the subjective nature of their trauma and handling it from that very individualized level rather than making presumptions about what is and is not traumatic for a person. It is further complicated by whether or not the measures that we often like to employ for measuring trauma or for determining the potential for PTSD, whether or not those are applicable to individuals on the autism spectrum. One issue they cited in their review is that when surveying professionals, only about 20% endorsed typically used measures of trauma severity for individuals on the autism spectrum. Not exactly filling one with confidence when you say 20%. So one of the things that they do argue for is the need for increased research on, for the developing instruments that are going to be more specifically more, not so much targeting, but more specifically tailored, there we go, to individuals with autism spectrum disorder. Along that same lines, there's concerns about treatment methodologies. They did suggest that EMDR may be a promising treatment intervention for individuals with autism spectrum disorder and co-occurring post-traumatic stress disorder. They also suggested that trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy may also be beneficial for these individuals. The challenge is there is not sufficient outcome studies that demonstrate the efficacy of either of these two modalities. So it's not necessarily that they're suggesting we don't use these. These may be the best of slim options, but they are certainly acknowledging the limitations in our understanding of whether or not there is efficacy in employing them. So until there are better outcome studies that can better demonstrate how well either EMDR or trauma-focused CBT is effective with people with autism spectrum disorders, take it with a grain of salt, I suppose. This is a wonderful, wonderful paper. I highly recommend it. Again, Quinton and colleagues, 2024 Review Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders. A link will be in the description. Now let's get into some ice cream making for a minute. So, the recipe that I'm looking at today, again, this is a dragon fruit ice cream. My inspiration for this really came from a dragon fruit drink I consumed way too much back about 25 years ago. The Snap put out an element-themed line of drinks. I've modified a couple different versions of recipes that I've seen online for this. So what I'm starting out with is 2/3 cups of milk, and we are going with 2/3 cups of fat-free cottage cheese. I have been experimenting with substituting cottage cheese for heavy cream. As much as I enjoy my heavy cream, I'm trying to look for higher protein, lower calorie options. I know a lot of people who are in the Ninja Creamy community like to use protein powder. I personally did not find that palatable, so this is sort of a compromise that I'm using. Usually I will blend this up initially. All right. From there, I'm going to add a little bit less than a half cup. I think I'm going to shoot for about 1/3 cup of sugar. That's about close enough. And to help with the consistency, because again, this is specifically for the Ninja Creamy, it's not your typical ice cream maker, I'm throwing in a little bit of xanthan gum, which helps keep it from over-freezing. And of course, my coffee pot goes off in the middle of talking about this. So blend this up a little bit more. Also, fun fact, my blender died. Everything seemed to be going on me this summer. So new fancy GE blender that I absolutely love. No affiliate link, just I think it's been a great purchase. All right, now that being said, the dragon fruit that I'm using is this pre-cut frozen dragon fruit. I found this works pretty well. I'm going to go with about 2 cups of this. Let me get it open. Okay, and that's about 2 cups right there. Throw that in. Make some noise. Okay, now the other thing I found, since it's inspired by this particular drink, it has a little bit more kick than the dragon fruit itself. Now, so to help with that, I add in some lime juice to taste. I've not really measured this out. That'll probably be my next thing to do, but a little bit more. Lime just doesn't always like mixing up well. There we go. I'm just getting that little bit of a kick in it now. Perfect. And last step is to put it in the creamy cup. So the creamy swirl actually has a selection for soft serve on it, but whether or not you do it that way or just eat it like regular ice cream, it's totally up to you. So let's dump that in. Oh, yes. Got a little bit extra there. That's fine, because like a kid eating cake batter, this will be a little bit of a snack. Probably could have gone a little bit less than that, but there is my Ninja Creamy Dragon Fruit Ice Cream recipe. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to throw this in the freezer. This has got to freeze for a day. And I will see you all in the next video. That being said, as always, go forward, do good work, and have a wonderful rest of your day.